Uh, so we're talking about the spiritual experience right now. It was what I'm trying to get at is that I started to realize that I had had spiritual experiences in my life. I just didn't recognize them as such, whether that be leaning over a crib and looking at my oldest son for the first time after getting him home from the hospital, and kind of that kind of feeling that you have with something of that nature. Or maybe it's being, getting up in the morning and you've got a hot cup of coffee and you just happen to be standing out on a balcony and watching the sunrise in some place that you might be. There's any number of things out there that can be a spiritual experience. So having that knowledge and education as to what it is, I think is as important as it is to having the spiritual experience. It's certainly necessary for the success of this program, but it is something that you can get over time. It doesn't have to be all of a sudden. It can be all of a sudden, but in either case, both are acceptable. So.
Spiritual experience, change our minds, or psychic change our thinking. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate or overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook.
And keep going, Rob.
Okay. Among a rapidly growing membership, thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, so frequent, are by no means a rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life. That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped into unsuspected inner resources, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves.
Yep. So a couple of things here is that we've talked a little bit about that sudden revolutionary change, and it's certainly something that Bill experienced, and he explains in the book. And for a lot of folks, others, that takes a bit of time. So there's a couple of things here. Quite often, friends of a newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. It's as much as people know that you're alcoholic or that you've been drinking, especially when you're trying to hide something like that. People know that you have, either because of the way that you're talking, your behavior, your actions, and or just the fact that they can smell the alcohol on you, because of the fact that it is very, very hard to hide, if not impossible. On top of that, you take that and just kind of flip it around. Okay, if you have started to recover and you're going down that path, and there are subtle changes that are happening, it is one thing that, as I live with myself, it's hard for me to see my subtle changes over a period of time because I'm with me all the time. However, if somebody isn't necessarily there, but on a daily basis or a weekly basis or something like that, what you end up with is people are going to start seeing your positive changes before you do. And I know that part of this too for me is that when I started to have positive changes, and I can't tell you when they were exactly, but I can tell you that they were happening, I didn't see it because in part I wasn't letting myself see it. I was still trying to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't drinking, one, and two, I was also I was still trying to come to terms with that, and I was kind of hiding behind it. So once I did realize that there had been that change, and I was able to say to myself, okay, this is easier because of now I have tapped into this this higher power, this inner strength, and at that point I knew that I had already had a series of spiritual experiences I'd had that psychic change and it had come over time. But when I finally woke up and realized I had had it, what a feeling it was. The last thing I want to kind of touch on here for that is that identifying with the conception of a power greater than themselves. We're really going to get into that as we talk along here. But the idea here is, and I want to make sure that we emphasize this, it's the willingness to believe is all that is required. Okay. A willingness to believe. It doesn't mean that you have to be, religious and that you've got God in your life and that type of thing. It's just a willingness to believe that there is something greater than yourself that you can tap into and that can assist and partner with you. And I use those as my words in helping you through to recovery. Rob?
Remember when Evie came to visit Bill? Bill took a look at Evie and said, something has changed. He saw something different in his eyes. And also in the doctor's opinion. After a year, Hank Parkhurst went back to see the doctor, and the doctor said, I remember the man's name, but I could not remember this man. He had changed so much. So most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that, oops, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that the couple of things here is, there's a lot of people that'll turn off immediately when they start hearing anything about God. Even if they still hear something about their higher power and that type of thing. So in these fellowship meetings, when people start to talk about that, it does have a tendency to cause resentment, and it results in people closing their minds. So the idea here is, and this is a very powerful statement that Rob just read, and it is that they provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. We're not talking again about the religious nature of God. We're not talking about a Baptist or a Catholic or Muslim or anything like that. What we're talking about is the spiritual concept. Spirituality, in my mind, is different than religion, and so this is really what we're trying to get you to kind of think about, and not be closed off from it. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, which makes me think of at a lot of meetings, you'll hear the set aside prayer. Set aside everything you think you know, okay? And leave your mind open to at least listen. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. There is a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. Herbert Spencer. Absolutely.
So idea here at the very end of this excerpt or addendum is essentially this, and that is just stay open-minded, be accepting, and allow yourself to be taken by this higher power, this kind of tapping into this inner strength. It's really a necessary ingredient to your recovery. And it is that ingredient, I believe, for me, that helped me to get over the speed bump. I was able to then kind of rely on that higher power. I could offload some of the pressure I was putting on myself. Some of the decisions I was making were singular decisions, and now I've got this higher power that I can kind of give it over to and just let things kind of happen. And there is this saying is what is the next right thing to do? And a large amount of my kind of tapping into my higher power was always started with, okay, I'm a little overwhelmed right now. What is the next right thing to do? And whatever that is, and it always would come to me, and it still does. And I still ask myself sometimes what that means, because I think what it is, because I think it's important. And it's clarifying, and it gives me the, okay, next right thing to do is this. And I do that. And then I go, what's the next right thing to do? And then after about 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, whatever that might be of those questions, I find that I'm now walking down this path, and things have gotten easier, and I've relied more on my partnership with my higher power than I did on my own in trying to make those decisions, because I was always making the wrong decisions for so many years with regard to my drinking and in the way that I was conducting myself. Okay, Rob, we'll go back to page 25.
Okay. Leo, just before we go, Herbert Spencer is given credit for this writing, but really, from what I've been told, is it was really done by William Paley, and I just want to give William his due.
Thank you, Rob.
No problem.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so back to page 25.
Yes, sir.
If you are seriously alcoholic, as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had not passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help.
Okay.
This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort.
Yeah. So here's that word honest. All right. You honestly have to want to do this. And again, it's an honest willingness to believe. Okay. And that's a good start. And you make that effort to try and tap into that higher power. There is no middle of the road. You'll hear some people, and we talk about this a little bit as we go forward, I'll drink beer instead of liquor or something like that, or I'll only try to drink, on certain days, or I will only drink 1 or 2 drinks and then I'll stop. There's that attempt to moderate. And there are people that will say, okay, there's your answer, is you just need to learn how to moderate. Well, the fact is, for us as alcoholics, as real alcoholics, we don't have that capability to moderate. Otherwise, we wouldn't be what is considered as a real alcoholic, because we have that allergy that kicks in. And once we take that first drink, we cannot stop until something happens, whether that be we run out of alcohol, which is obviously a travesty for real alcoholics. We pass out, or something happens that causes us to have to stop it, for whatever reason. So there really is no middle of the road solution. The same thing holds true for finding that higher power. It's not like lip service or anything like that. A lot of people may say, "Oh yeah, I've got God," and they they don't really have that. And I think that that's a personal thing. So I don't really try to get in and define that, but I'm saying it so that you can look inside yourself and really decide just exactly how you want to kind of go about it. But you've either got 2 alternatives really here. You've got 2 paths. One is to the bitter end, which is dying some type of alcoholic death. And there is, that's no exaggeration. And the other is to accept the spiritual help. You have to do a lot of the work. In fact, most of the work is on you, but you can make it easier, and you can find the solution by tapping into that higher power. Rob?
Certainly, we're on page 26, everybody. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden spring that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Okay,
so we're talking about Roland Hazard, just as a point of as a point of reference as to who we're talking about as far as this businessman is concerned. He did, and I give credit to Dr. Young. He was one of the foremost authorities at the time. And certainly we've seen in the, and we'll see it again here, but anytime you go to a treatment center and you go through recovery, you know, the absence of alcohol certainly does improve you. Any kind of physical exercise that you might include and certain diet and eating well will also improve things. And in that regard, you also have improved mentally because you're not struggling with how you're feeling and that type of thing. So no doubt that that Roland did feel improved and that type of thing. And to Dr. Young's credit, you know, he acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Well, yeah, there's a lot of people that think that, oh, all I have to do is just stop drinking, exercise a little bit, eat right, and I'll be fine. I've got this. Okay. Well, that's if as a real alcoholic, remember, you suffer from two symptoms, and the malady is powerless against that first drink. And then after taking that first drink, you can't stop. So one of the things I made a note of this, and it starts with above all and finishes with was unthinkable, is never, ever fall for this. Never fall for the fact that just because you're improved and you're feeling good about things, that all of a sudden you're cured. Okay. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. And I can tell you from times of relapsing on my own and being able to stop for a day or three or a week or four, mine seemed to be those 30-day marks. I can't tell you how many times that I hit 30 days and then next thing I know, I'm drinking. And at that time, I would be even more and more frustrated with the fact that I had gotten that far and I still couldn't stop. Well, I hadn't tapped into my higher power. I wasn't really allowing myself to get assistance and help from my higher power and others. And I wasn't really adhering to this program. And not until I did I start seeing the success that I've got today.
Roland Hazard obviously had lots of money, came from a family with money, because if he went to the number 2 guy in the world, a psychiatrist, couldn't get in to see Dr. Freud. So who does he go to? He goes to the number 2 guy. So it must have cost him a lot of money. Like Bill, he thought he had learned quite a bit. Self-knowledge would keep him sober. Didn't work. Remember, Bill, second time in treatment, fear thought would sober him up forever, but it only kept him sober for a short period of time. The malady in the mind, as my friend Bill from New Jersey always said, the brain wants its candy and will tell you anything to make you take it, okay, which is the malady of the mind. And you know what? I'm okay this time. We get a couple of months, as Leo said, and the brain starts talking to us. You're not really an alcoholic. You're fine. You can have a drink, 2 drinks. Remember, was it Fred at the bar? You know, a couple of cocktails before dinner won't hurt me. You know, Bill's thinking when he was at the Mayflower Hotel, you know, I'm going to go in for a glass of ginger ale. Well, maybe a couple of drinks, 3 at the most, will be okay. Brain plays tricks on us. Remember, the malady's job is to get us to take that first drink. Once we take that first drink, the allergy kicks in and we're off to the races. We can't control the amount. So that brain, powerful. As I say, my buddy Bill from New Jersey always says, the brain wants its candy and it will tell you anything to get you to take that first drink. So he returned to this doctor whom he admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this?
Well, I think we all kind of do know why this is. And the fact is that, you know, we're powerless over it. And it has us. We don't have it. So this is a common way of saying it. The other thing here is what's baffling about this is that most of us are successful in other areas of our lives. We face challenges and problems, and for the most part, we can solve those challenges and those problems and come out with an acceptable solution. a reasonable path forward and that type of thing. And yet it doesn't work when we're talking about the ability to stop drinking and get sober and recover from alcoholism. It's just not there. This is a disease that has us. So it's very baffling, and that's one of the key areas that we talk about this as being so baffling is how can I be successful over here but not successful over here? Rob?
He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion.
Yep, we'll keep going.
Okay. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude.
Okay, so a couple of things here is that a lot of people think that one, you have to be completely devoid of alcohol around you in order to stay stopped. Now, a lot of people will do that, especially in the very beginning, and I am not going to say whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Point is, if you are trying to recover from alcoholism, then if in fact in the beginning you need to be free of alcohol in where you're living or whatever, sure. If it's difficult at the beginning, and it was for me to go into a bar with a bunch of other people and not drink, then maybe you try to avoid that to a certain extent at that point. And again, these are in the beginnings. And there is this belief that the only way an alcoholic can recover is to be completely walled off or walled away from alcohol, which is simply just not true. And we're going to see this more so, and I think the rest of us. The example for me I did stay away from those areas for the first little bit, but part of that was just because I was actively working through my own problems and my own challenges with alcohol, and I didn't trust myself at the time. I didn't trust my higher power at that point in time. Again, remember, I was kind of the educational kind of person who had to get it over time. But there is now, after being recovered for as long as I have been recovered, and being at a point where I can say that I'm recovered, there's alcohol in my home now, and I completely don't even remember that it's here unless I'm talking about it in these contexts. And so and I can go to somebody else's home, and other people can be drinking, and I'm just fine not drinking. I can even go out to a restaurant or a bar now and be around alcohol, see alcohol, look at the wall of alcohol, especially sitting behind a bar or something like that. And while it does cross my mind, I'm going to admit to you, certainly it does. I mean, if I go to a casino, I'm certainly thinking about gambling. Or if I go to a racetrack, I'm thinking about racing. Well, if I go to a bar, then yeah, there's going to be somebody thinking about drinking and stuff. But the point is that because I've been able to tap into this higher power, because I've been able to rely on that higher power to assist me and be a part of me, I am actually now able to be around alcohol without the urges to drink. And it took a while, but I got there. And that certainly is possible. So in other words, I don't need to be completely walled away from alcohol in certain settings, in all settings, to be honest, without having that defense against that first drink. Now, I'm not saying that if you were to put a glass of something in front of me and tell me to drink, that I'm not going to have the urges to drink. That's not that point. But certainly that's not going to be my reality. And now we're getting to the side of, the bell curve on either end of it. One side is you're completely walled off on it. And the other one is people are pushing drinks your way left and right. And you can't hardly, turn around without a drink. So yeah, there's going to be those instances where I do tend to stay away from because of those urges and those problems that you can have. But I can tell you without a doubt that I'm able to go out without disaster, and I keep that simple attitude towards it. Rob? You're muted, Rob.
Sorry, my dogs are going crazy here, so I'm muted. I apologize. I was just going to say that Bill is going to talk more about what we can do with alcohol on pages 99 to about 101, where he talks about, and I'm sure most of you can remember about the, going to the Greenland ice cap and an Eskimo showing up with a bottle. We can be sent, we can go to anywhere we need to go to, as long as we have the right purpose for being there. Remember, it's what can we bring to the situation, not what we can take. So we can go to weddings, we can go to office parties, etc. As long as our motives are right and we are connected to God. We're on page 27, everybody, people that just came in. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description."
Okay, so we've got a reference back to the spiritual experience back on page 567. And on top of that, we're talking about this psychic change. And it's interesting that Dr. Young, on the one hand, has been unsuccessful in bringing about this change in someone, and at the same time trying to do that. He does explain this thing called a phenomena, which is something that is hard to explain as a definition. But he does actually recognize this vital spiritual experience. And he further goes on to kind of define that as being these guiding forces that are of men that are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. That is what we define as that psychic change. It is a paradigm shift in the way that you look at, you act in, and are around this thing called life. And it is definitely a 180 out of what you're doing before. And it's going to be slightly, if not drastically, different for people of different walks of life. And those experiences are also going to be also different, because we all look through the lens of life in the color that we look through it in. But that psychic change, and I think that really does explain it, and that is that the guiding forces of lives of these men are suddenly cast aside. What is it that brings you to what you do today and how you do it? And a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. You stop thinking about yourself and you start thinking about others, as an example. Okay, Rob?
Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience.
Okay, and there's a really good point here. We're not talking about, being a good church member, somebody that goes and doesn't miss a Sunday, somebody that contributes to the church's coffers and is and tithes, as they call it. This again, we're not talking about your ability to be a good Catholic or a good Baptist, a good Muslim, etc. That's not this point. This, and we'll get into this in another chapter with regard to we agnostics. you know, the person that is the true and devout religious person also has something to gain from we agnostics, because they are just as much they are just as closed off to the idea of this higher power as somebody that might be agnostic or atheist. So, right. Point is that we're trying to get you to have a spiritual experience, not this, you know, the Ten Commandments type of religious experience. That's not what this is all about. So just because you go to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, or whatever the frequency is for your particular religion, just because you go to church on all the time without missing, doesn't make you that's not what we're talking about. That's a completely different and separate thing within what we're trying to describe. Now, I'm not telling you that AA is not got some, isn't a religious entity. Okay. It's just not that type of a religious entity. Okay. We are talking primarily about a spiritual experience. And we'll kind of get into it a little bit more here. Rob?
Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, this is just as a sidebar, I don't know how many times that I read that one sentence here that said, what seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. I misinterpreted reed as being a flimsy reed of a book. It is actually a flimsy reed, meaning a blade of grass. I just tell you that because it was one of the things that I glossed over for so many times that I read this without having kind of gotten through this. But seeking the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men, then has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God, that higher power. I call it my higher power. I try to, and that's how it is for me. And that is this new life that has been given me in my ability to reach out, embrace, and just say, what's that next right thing to do, and hand it over and let that kind of be my guide. It does really work. It really, really works. Rob?
What would God have me do? Instead of, what does Rob want today? It's what would God have me do? What's the next right thing for me to do? The distinguished American psychologist, William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator, with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms, as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters.
And certainly not, just as a reinforcement that this isn't to replace your religion, if that's if that's what you do. It does say, as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Again, it's just that honest willingness to try. That's all that is required, and you're well on your way. And it is different for everybody. He does say that, you know, your spiritual experience is going to be different than the next person's spiritual experience. So, you know, especially if you're out there trying to have the same, like if I'm trying to have the same spiritual experience that Rob is having, I'm going to fall short, and I'm going to be disappointed, and I'm going to feel defeated if I actually try to say, well, if that's what Rob had and I don't have it, then I must not be able to get it. So I will tell you that you're going to have your own experience, and it's going to be different for everyone. Rob? You're muted again, sir.
I do apologize.
It's okay, Rob.
I said something so brilliant, I can't repeat it. It was so brilliant. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair, with each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships.
Okay, that's just a disclaimer, and I'll leave it at that. It's just a disclaimer to say, hey, we're not going to get in the way of anybody's religion. And oh, by the way, there are many people in this program that are not religious, and that's okay. Some of us are, and that's okay. That's really all we're getting at this point. Rob?
In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such conviction no great obstacle to a spiritual experience.
Sure.
Further,
go ahead. I was just in the following chapter, we've got this coming up as an explanation of alcoholism. It's going to go into more depth about what we're talking about, what this alcoholism thing is, and as we understand it, and it is of the first 100 people, and it's of their program and their understanding of it. It's not going to be my understanding or Rob's understanding. And then also for addressing the agnostic. Again, I will tell you that the uber religious is also can benefit from this chapter as well. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Absolutely, and as long as you're not closed off from this, you're well on your way. Right.
Further on, clear-cut directions are given, showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives.
Absolutely. So we won't get into the personal stories so much. That's going to be up to you to read those stories. We stay in the first portion of the book. But there are, and this is the important part, there are clear-cut directions given showing how we recovered. Nothing in this book is left to chance. Nothing in this book is left for you to have to decide on yourself with regard to interpretation and not sure of what they mean by, and or it's not asking you a question that it leaves you hanging, and that answer is up for interpretation. So everything is very clear-cut. Every time they ask a question, they answer it, and everything is going to be in detail. And certainly Rob and I will make sure that we keep it as black and white as absolutely possible. Rob?
We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing.
Absolutely. So we're going to close out that there is a solution, which is telling you that there is, in fact, a program that is in this book that we are uncovering right now. And we've already heard about Bill's story. We've heard about other individuals that have had this spiritual experience, and we talk a lot about that within the solution itself. And now what we're going to do is move into one of the next great chapters, and that is chapter 3, more about alcoholism. A couple of things I do want to kind of talk about here is there are two symptoms. There is the physical allergy and the malady of the mind. So we're going to reinforce that over and over again, but I did want to kind of highlight and emphasize that as we go along. And there is a lot to learn in this. I'll give you a quick story. I used to be kind of a smartass, if you will. I'd go into fellowship meetings, and one of my first questions is how do you know you're an alcoholic? You know, there's no definition of an alcoholic. Nobody can tell me that if you have these symptoms, you're going to be an alcoholic. Much like I was saying, well, how do you know you have cancer, you know you have diabetes or something like that, but how do you know you're an alcoholic? And I'm going to tell you, and I've heard this before, but not one person in those meetings ever picked up a big book and said, Leo, look at chapter 3. Let's talk about alcoholism and what it is. And here are what the symptoms are. Nobody ever did. In fact, what I got was definitions of their own, meaning that, well, I used to drink by myself, so I considered myself alcoholic. I got a DUI, so I considered myself alcoholic. I drank until I would black out, and I had periods of time that I had lost time and didn't know what I was doing, so I considered myself alcoholic. And certainly those are end results of drinking, but maybe you're a moderate drinker and you just had a bender one time and it just happened to be an anomaly for you. Or maybe you're a heavy drinker and you did in fact drink too much and something happened. But you know, if you're able to stop, but nobody ever in the time that I was in those fellowships could tell me about what alcoholism was. And it wasn't until I got into the book when I had people that are in the Keystone Group, to be honest with you, that started digging into this, that I finally said, now I understand what it is to be alcoholic. I understand alcoholism, and here it is. So I just want to let you know that if anybody ever asks you, as somebody you're trying to work with, whether you're being a sponsor or just trying to get somebody started down the path, if they start asking you what is alcoholism, how do you define an alcoholic, you know, obviously you've got this big book and you can take them right to chapter 3 and you can walk the walk with them right through this chapter. Okay, Rob.
Okay, so we're on page 30, everybody. More about alcoholism. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. Okay, so first and foremost, most of us are unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics. I mean, you're kind of admitting defeat at that point. That you're admitting that you have got this problem, this disease, this thing that ails you, and you're different than other people. Other people don't understand it. I didn't understand it myself, and so it was embarrassing for me to even look at it, even personally, without even admitting it to others. I was embarrassed by it. And they're characterized by these countless vain attempts to prove that I could drink like other people. Oh my gosh, so many times that I said, I'm going into this knowing I was physically and mentally kind of like there would be beads of sweat on my forehead. I'm walking into this bar. I'm drinking no more than 2 drinks, maybe 3 at the most, depending on how long we're here, and I'm going to stop. And the next thing I know, I'm being carried out to my car, and I'm trying to figure out what happened as they're pouring me into the backseat of my car. And somebody that's a friend of mine is now driving me home with somebody else following behind, and to pick them up and take them home. But this great obsession, which is one of the first the obsessions that they talk about, the stop or the drink like normal people, is that obsession. On page 23, we have the other obsession, which is to stop drinking and stay stopped. Both of those are just huge obsessions. And for years, I was obsessed with this thinking that somehow I could drink like everybody else. And had I not been able to find this program and find my higher power, I absolutely know that I would have pursued it into the gates of insanity or death. And I say that to say that, you know, maybe I would have died a bit earlier than I normally would have. I was certainly drinking to excess and couldn't stop, and that was a problem. You know, to say that I would have died, I don't know. I would tell you that I probably would have died prematurely at the very least, but it is there. And it is important to get that, because it is the one thing that you're going to find that people are struggling with in the beginning of their attempts to try and recover,
And that is that they're going to try to convince themselves that they can drink like other people, and they're going to do it over and over and over again. And they're going to keep, every time they get into it, I know I did this last time, but this time I've got it. This time I've got it. And every time you don't. I can't begin. And there were times in the beginning when I was thinking about my own alcoholism. I thought, well, maybe I'm not so alcoholic and everything. But all I had to do was remember when I got carried back to my condominium one time, my home, and I don't remember any of it. And I keep telling myself, if you are going to be in that kind of a situation, in that kind of condition, there is no doubt that you are alcoholic. Rob?
A great obsession, control and enjoy my drinking. When I was controlling my drinking, I wasn't enjoying it. And when I was enjoying my drinking, I couldn't control it. So we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed.
Absolutely. And this is so important. This is that admitting, learning, understanding, and internalizing your powerlessness over alcohol. You are absolutely powerless. And you have to be able to be honest with all the way to the core of your innermost self in order to do that. And it is the first step in recovery. You have to know and realize just how vulnerable you are, how powerless you are, and how much it has you. And that is an important distinction, and it is a must-have on the path of recovery. The delusion that we are like other people are presently maybe has to be smashed. This goes back up to that obsession that somehow you are able to kick this, you can control this, etc. It has to be smashed. There just is no other way to do it. If you can't get to this point and honestly tell yourself, understand and internalize this, and I can't overemphasize this enough, you have to be able to smash that. So I'm going to stop right there today before we get too far into more
Leo,
about alcoholism.
can I just say one thing before we
Absolutely.
drop it off?
Yeah.
If we have the inkling that we can still somehow control and enjoy our drinking, we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. We have to, as it says in the book, we have to smash the idea that we can ever take a drink safely. Why? Because we know that we have the allergy. Anytime we take any alcohol into our system whatsoever, it triggers the allergy and we cannot control the amount. And until we fully accept that, until we concede to our innermost self that we have this disease, and if we will not, if we still have that lingering doubt in our mind, we're going to go back to drinking. So, sorry, Leo, I just wanted to throw that. I just want to emphasize and re-emphasize that.
Well, this is important right now. And I know that we kind of hit each other over the head with it, but it's that distinction. It is that awareness, and it is that position, or that place you have to get to in order to find yourself on the right path of recovery. So I'm going to ask Bill from New Jersey to say a few words for us, please.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Did a good job today. I enjoyed being here. Very good meeting. A lot of the stuff that you read and we talked about today, we started on page 25. And that talks about this middle of the road solution. That means no spirituality, trying to use just human aid to do it. And that would be willpower and choice and control. And that stuff doesn't work for us. And the reason Bill put this in here, that there's no middle of the road solution, we can't do it halfway. We have to do this the whole way. We have to go through this whole spiritual process in order to get better. We just can't use our willpower and our choice. That doesn't work for an alcoholic. And he tells us that we have two alternatives. One is to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation. That means we stay in step one. We're powerless and we stay powerless, and we're not going to do anything about it, and we're going to keep drinking. That's basically what step one means. We're powerless over alcohol. That means I'm going to drink again because I don't have the power to do anything about it. And the other thing is to accept spiritual help. In other words, That's the only way out of this, according to Alcoholics Anonymous. We have to accept spiritual help. If we don't, we're not going to get out of it. And then he talks about this here businessman, Roland Hazard. I like this guy. I like that name. I identify with Roland Hazard. When I was drinking, I was a Roland Hazard. That's exactly what I get out of that, Roland Hazard. He went to see this doctor over in Switzerland, Dr. Young, and he believed that he was fixed after he learned all about himself. And he drank sometime after he left. And sometime after that, he returned to the doctor again. And the doctor basically told him that he needed to have a spiritual experience. But this doctor didn't know how to bring that about. He was trying to do that by using scientific methods, and that didn't work. But this doctor understood that a spiritual experience was necessary for an alcoholic to get sober. And sometime later, Roland got involved with the Oxford group, and that's where he got his spirituality from. And that's where he was able to stop drinking. And why Roland's important, Roland is the guy that helped Ebby Thatcher get sober. And Ebby Thatcher is the guy that helped Bill Wilson get sober. So if it wasn't for Roland, Ebby probably would have never got sober. And if it wasn't for Ebby, Bill would have never got sober. And if it wasn't for Bill, we wouldn't be here. So that's why Roland's important. I guess that's why they stuck him in the book here. And then we go over to this next chapter, more on alcoholism. This is probably a lot of people's favorite chapter. I know a lot of people that I've dealt with said they love this chapter. There's a lot of information in it and a lot of really, really good stuff. And like you pointed out, the first thing it says is most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. Most alcoholics, until they start to get better, until they get into a program, they will not admit they're an alcoholic. For whatever reason, we're in denial, or we just don't want to admit it, or we don't want to think that if I'm an alcoholic, I'm going to have to quit drinking, or whatever the reason is, most alcoholics will not admit that they're an alcoholic. And then it talks about the idea that we can someday we can control and enjoy our drinking. Like Rob pointed out, that's totally impossible for an alcoholic to do. We cannot control and enjoy drinking at the same time. If I'm controlling my drinking, I am not enjoying it because I'm not drinking the way I want to. And if I drink the way I want to, I'm not controlling it. The only way I can enjoy it is if I'm out of control. So an alcoholic cannot do that. Once you have to control something, that's an indication that it's out of control. The reason I would have to control it is because it's out of control. So that tells me right there something's wrong. Just that term control, that's like an oxymoron for an alcoholic. It doesn't really work. It doesn't work for us. And if you have to use control, that means you're already out of control. And then it's got people turn this into a question. They call it the first step question. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. You can ask yourself, do I fully concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic? That's the first step. We have to admit to ourselves. We have to concede to ourselves. We have to accept it. We have to acknowledge that we're an alcoholic before we can do anything. You can't get rid of these delusions or the obsessions or anything until you do step one. Step one is what gets rid of that stuff. If I don't do step one, there's no way I'm going to admit that I have a delusion that I can drink like other people. I'm not going to be able to admit that. I'm not going to be able to smash that until I first admit to myself that I'm an alcoholic. That's the first, that's what it says right here. This is the first step in recovery. That's really, really important to get to that. If you don't get to that first step, you can try everything else, and it's only going to work halfway. It's not really going to work. All right, thanks a lot for letting me share. That's all I got.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
You're muted, Leo.
I was pulling a Rob. Hey, we're going to close with the
Thanks,
Serenity
Bill.
prayer.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can.
Wisdom
Wisdom to know the difference.
Just for today.